Hello and welcome to this video where I will explain a little bit about what we're going to do in this lab one. Um, I have slides. You can also find them in Canvas. So I will go very quickly through them. So the idea of this lab one, this survey development, is that we need to create a survey where we will use to collect the quantitative data for our assignment. So this is where we will construct the surveys. This is the purpose of this first lab. So in our study, we are going to target university students. That is the kind of individual that we want to respond to our survey. So keep that in mind when you do this, when you think about this. And we expect to collect, I think minimum, we need like 100, but ideally 150. So let's aim for 200 response. And the variables, what we need to include is what we will create now in the lab. We need to create questions that will allow us to operationalize the variables that we are doing in our project. So it's important that we do this very consciously, which questions we are going to use to get the information about the variables and the concepts that we need. So the questions in the survey, something very important is to recognize that this creating the survey takes time. It's not that easy. I make things easier because everything is well planned in advance. So I will give you a lot of information that it will normally take time to find. So it's normally complex and it requires time, but I'm trying to make it quick. I already will solve many issues that normally you will have in your dissertation, but for this assignment, you don't have to worry about them. Then also we need to recognize that the questions have to be carefully designed, carefully and revised as well in order to make sure that the answer is helpful. And this is not only about how the questions are asked, it is also about how the questionnaire is designed, how it is presented. There are, for example, I will do that, but when you do that in your dissertation, you have to be careful, like, for example, to set some limits. Like, if you are going to ask the age, do not allow the instrument or the survey, do not permit that the respondent can write letters, for example, because that will make things harder later. For example, set a limitation where the respondent can only add numbers. So, for example, how old are you? Then they will answer with 18 or 21 or something like that, and not 21.5 because that will make things difficult, or not 21 years old because the years old will make things harder. Always try to think about which will be easier for you in the future. For example, also maybe if you are going to ask for a year, ask that the answer needs to be in 4 digits. So if someone writes, for example, 27 instead of 2027, then they will pop up like an error and then they need to write 4 digits instead of only two. So these kind of things are things that are helpful when you design the survey. And then something extremely important, and the reason why we are doing this lab, it is that we cannot come up with questions out of nowhere. We cannot create new questions to ask for the concepts that we want to include in our study. You will learn this in the quantitative lecture. I don't know if you have already listened to that, but it's very important to ensure the reliability of the instruments, that the questions do not come out of nowhere. So because of that, we are going to borrow questions from previous studies. We are going to not create questions out of nowhere. Otherwise, it will require a lot of time and effort to test if the questions actually measure what we want to measure. So instead of doing that, to avoid that, we are going to simply borrow, not simply, but we are going to borrow questions from previous research. Because at least if these questions were used before, they were hopefully, we will check that in the papers, but these questions are tested before. They have been calculated and some reliability tests. They have been tested not in only in one study, maybe more than one study have used those questions. So we can rely and we can say, okay, we trust that these questions really capture the concept that we want to test. So Especially for the variable questions, like for the dependent and independent variable, we are going to borrow questions from previous studies. We cannot come out of nowhere with this. And beyond those dependent and independent variables, we will also include questions for control variables. Like we also in the quantitative lecture, you learn about control variables. So we also need to include questions uh, beyond only your dependent and independent. We also need to include age, gender, level of education, program, these kind of things. So it's very important to have control variables. So the task for today is first ensure that you understand which is the topic that you are going to study in your assignment. This is decided by the group where you are. So make sure that you identify which is your dependent and your independent variable. Then you will take a look at the literature that is connected to your topic. I will show you in the next video all that, where you can find the literature that is connected. And then you will need to do a very simple task. Just write one paragraph and copy paste the questions that I already have. It's going to be easy. I will do that in the next video. And finally, submit that document. It's going to be a Word file with a short paragraph and the questions that you will ask. And that's it. That's everything that you need. That will help me to construct the survey. I will do the survey after the lab one, after everyone submits lab one. I will construct the survey and then I will send you the link so that you can distribute it with your friends, and also you yourself can answer to this question. Since you are a student, you can answer to the question. And for you, this submission is going to be literally copy pasted into your group assignment in the section 3.2.1. I will explain about that next week when we do the next submission of chapter 3. But now I will move to the next video where I will explain what to do with the other document that is important that you have.